Welcome to Folk Alley. I'm Jim Bloom. Our special guests today are Madison Violet, which would be Lisa McIsaac, Brantley McEachern, and Adrian, make sure I get this correctly, Larishan. I think we have it. We just received your latest album, which I mistakenly thought was your debut, only to learn through research you've been around for 8 years performing. So we're going to talk a little bit about your background, maybe further. You are both from small Scottish towns. How did you meet up?
Brantley was nosy, actually.
Uh-huh.
We were in Toronto. I'm from the East Coast, and Brantley is from a small Scottish town in Ontario. We met in Toronto in the big metropolis, and I was at a place called the Green Room, kind of an artsy hangout place, and Brantley overheard me say my last name, which is McIsaac, which is not really that popular or that familiar name in Ontario, but it is on the East Coast, and Brantley's father, coming from the same town as mine, she knew of that name, and she walked over and introduced herself and said, are you McIsaac from Cape Breton? And lo and behold, I was, and shortly thereafter, we discovered so many things that we knew about one another's families, but we just hadn't met before, that, you know, our fathers went to school together. And
Lisa went to church with my grandma and all my cousins.
How strange.
The odd bingo game.
And the rest is history. Now, your first two albums were produced by John Reynolds, who's also worked with U2. They're very different sounding from this album you've just put out, from what I understand. Is that right?
Mm-hmm.
Very different, yeah.
So what happened to make you switch to become more acoustic?
I think it was the many years of traveling as a duo. You know, we put out 2 albums, full production, drums, lots of drum programming. I had come from a very trip-hop background, more of a rock pop kind of background. Adrian and I were actually in a band together called Zoe Bliss. And so that was kind of, you know, John heard those first 2 records, and then he heard what we were doing, the new stuff that we had written, and that was sort of, you know, that's his touch, his natural, as a drummer, you know, that's what's natural for him, is to do what he did for our first 2 records. But really, us traveling as a duo, it was very much more rootsy and acoustic, obviously, than what our albums were. And people wanted that. And actually, we wanted that. And we realized that, you know, going back to our parents' record collections and what we listened to as kids, it was more about what we were doing at that time.
We also wanted an album that was a bit more indicative of our live sound, and even though it's a fully produced album, it is something that we can pull off as a duo or a trio. So
the producer sort of took you into his own image, if you will.
Well, not really. We didn't, you know, actually working with him was amazing. It was one of the most incredible experiences I've ever had working with a producer, because we landed on his doorstep in London, and we just played all the songs acoustically, and then he built around that. Whereas other producers we had worked with were more about, you know, playing all the instruments and then us coming in and singing them. So he built the track around what we did. But of course, yeah, he puts his own stamp on it. And at the time, that was exactly what the sound we wanted.
Adrian, you can chip in here if you like. As Canadian performers, and a lot of folks in the States may not be aware of this, but you actually are able to get some support from your government to be performers in terms of recording and producing and so forth. What is that like, and how hard is that to get that connection?
It is hard. There's a lot of paperwork to have to go through, and you need to prove that what you're doing is, I guess, worthwhile, and that you're making a legitimate career out of it. And thankfully, for us in Ontario, there's the Toronto Arts Council, the Ontario Arts Canada Council, there's Radio Star Maker, and they're just Factor, and they're just, the government really wants to support the talent and make sure that there's still a creative process going on, which is amazing. It enables so many independent artists that don't have big record deals and a load of money behind them to able to fund their careers, so that they are able to go out there and promote Canadian music.
Are you judged at some later date to see if you're still worthy of this support, or?
Well, I don't think you're judged, but you still have to go through the same paperwork every time for an application. There are some, I guess there are some where it's kind of, what do they call that? The board approval, where you're sort of already approved
Direct
because
board
you're direct board approval, where you've shown the album sales, or the amount of theaters that you're selling out or whatever. So you get to that level at some point, but I guess you have to just make sure that they know you're still working and you're still applying for these grants. And
I think they want to see growth as well. There are things like Star Maker. Initially, you'll only be funded by Star Maker once you sell X amount of albums. And once they give you marketing and support to promote your album, they do want to see that there is growth. And if you're going back to territories that there are more fans coming to the shows and you're selling more albums. And if you can prove that and you show that, then they'll support you again.
Well, let's let you prove it here. Let's hear something. What would you like to do?
We're going to start out with the first track on the record, and it's called The Ransom.
Well, I'll pay the rent. You pay the ransom if you can. 'Cause by accident, we're down to our last cent. The money ain't coming in like I'd hoped. All this smoke is like a hammer in my throat. It's only rock and roll with a sold-out show. Darling, please, can we go home? So quiet down in front. Gotta get through this before I burn out. Hey, mister, don't you run this down. I can't hold my tongue, so bring the curtain down. The money ain't coming in like I'd hoped. Motor court hotels are gonna confiscate my soul. It's gonna hurt like hell when the story's too sad to be told. Darling, please, can we go home? Money ain't coming in like I'd hoped. We're indeed too late, about $1 too short. I'm run down straight, I can't give it no more. Darling, please, darling, please, darling, please, can we go home?
That was The Ransom. It's the lead track off the new album from Madison Violet, who are visiting us. I'm Jim Bloom. It's Folk Alley. You have this new album. You are touring the States for the first time. Is that right?
Not the first time. We toured here about 8 years ago with Josh Joplin and Peter Stewart, and it was kind of like a 3 bands. And we played Chicago. I think we played Cleveland. We played many different venues, but again, 8 years ago. and we never came back until November. We did Mountain Stage and a show down in New York, and so it's nice to be back just south of the border.
Now, was it Mad Violet before it was Madison Violet?
It was.
Is that
It was
right?
Mad Violet for about 8 years, and it's been Madison Violet for the last 2.
What is it like performing in the States compared to where you're from? Any different?
I don't know. I mean, that was a hard question actually, because people ask us that about Europeans and down the States, and how different it is from Canada. I mean,
You know what? It depends on the city. It depends on the venue. Sometimes you'll get a really reserved, mellow crowd. Sometimes you'll get a crowd that will sing along instantly if you ask them to. So it's the same in every territory. You get mellow audiences. You get rowdy audiences. You get good backstage catering. You get crappy backstage catering. It's it's the luck of the draw.
Now, Lisa, your brother is a very well-known fiddler and dancer, Ashley McIsaac.
Mm-hmm.
Did you grow up sort of thinking, well, I'd like to do this too, or was it a simultaneous thing for you?
I started playing when I was 9, so I had been playing concerts since I was little. I actually never thought that I would do it for a living. I didn't really think that you could, because coming from Cape Breton, who thought that being a fiddle player was a career? And then, so I was actually going to go into pharmacy when I was graduating high school, and Ashley's career kind of exploded when I was in grade 11, and it was a real eye-opener for me, and I realized that there was the possibility of doing this for a living. And then when I graduated, I actually left school a couple months early to do a touring musical comedy review show, and I got that taste of touring, and I realized that I didn't really want to go and be in a lab coat. I would rather be on a stage. So I didn't end up going to university. I went right on the road.
I tried to get her to wear that lab coat on stage, but
And how about you, Brentley? Did you have another career in mind?
well, funny enough, I was going to be wearing a lab coat too, because I won a little scholarship to go to school to be a medical lab technologist. And after the first year, I was like, what am I doing? I couldn't stand the smells in the lab. I couldn't stand the sight of blood or anything. I didn't know what I was thinking. I think my brother's a paramedic, my sister's a nurse, so I was following in that, in those footsteps. And I just happened to be good in math and sciences, so I figured, that was the path for me.
Adrian, the silent bassist, singing the third part. What about you? Did you have an escape plan?
I wore a lab coat for 10 years. I did.
That's right.
I was actually, what I like to call it, was an ink scientist. I worked for a wallpaper company formulating inks for 10 years.
Did you play on the side, or?
I always played. Since I was a kid, I always played music, but never took it seriously enough to either take it in school or, pursue a career, but crossed paths with friends and decided to, go on the road.
And you've played with lots of others as well, as a session player in
As a
studio and
bass
so
player,
forth?
yeah, primarily.
Primarily bass.
Always bass, yeah.
Always bass. So who do you all listen to? Who's your favorite right now? We'll start with you, Adrian.
Wow. It's hard to say. I listen to a lot of different types of music. So I would say my friends that play music back home. Rich Burnett, Ron Leary.
Brentley, how about you? Could be contemporary or a legend?
I grew up listening to Neil Young. He's kind of my hero. I was really fond of Cat Stevens. Those Tea for the Tillerman and Harvest were the 2 records that really kind of made me really want to sing.
Your Desert Island records.
Yeah, my Desert Island records. And then when I remember hearing Sinead O'Connor when I was a teenager on the radio, and thought that was one of the most incredible female voices I'd ever heard, and that gave me again more courage. Now I'm listening to, I'm still listening to those records. I'm really into the Fine Frenzy right now. I'm really loving her stuff. Jim White, and I just heard a new song of his the other day that Adrian played me, and I just love him.
Fleet Foxes.
The Fleet Foxes are, the list just goes on and on and on. Phoebe Snow, an amazing voice.
And Lisa, a couple from you?
Well, funny enough, she's saying what she listened to growing up. I pretty much strictly heard instrumental traditional Scottish fiddle music until I was about 17. So
Oh.
I never heard a lyric ever until I left school. But now, I'm a huge fan of Gillian Welsh and the Americana genre and Steve Earle and what have I been listening to? I've actually been listening to the Noisettes and Sharon Jones and the Dap Kings. Very good.
I'd like to have you play something off your new album, and it's a song that is being chosen a lot by radio stations around both countries. Laurel Lee is the song. On the album, Chris Cool plays banjo, but your distinct harmony blend really comes through here.
Thank you.
Was there a Laurel Lee? Is that important?
There is a Laura Lee. I don't like to get into it too much, but it's sort of, it's loosely based on a character from Cape Breton, and but we did change her name so that she wouldn't actually know it was about her.
To protect the innocent and improve the rhyme scheme.
Yes, exactly.
Could we hear it?
Sure.
Don't go telling lies to me, Laura Lee. Ain't no good to keep crying those tears to me. You'll find another lover and hide him from your mother. Seek out the bag and keep it under covers. Oh, don't go telling lies to me, Laura Lee. I know a girl from a hard town, the sparkling eyes in a red crown. She knew way around. She left home in a white dress, tight dress. No ring round her finger for tonight's guest. Gonna keep it on low down. Keep it on low down. Don't go telling lies to me, Laura Lee. Ain't no good to keep crying those tears to me. You'll find another lover and hide him from your mother. Seek out the bag, keep it under covers. Oh, don't go telling lies to me, Laura Lee. Come on, girl, you got your head down, put your foot down. Nothing to lose, nothing been found. But you always find yourself a strong man, wrong man. I'm playing this fool till another comes round. Another comes round. Another comes round. You'll find another lover and hide him from your mother. Seek out the bag and keep it under covers. Oh, don't go telling lies to me, Laura Lee. You'll find another lover and hide him from your mother. Seek out the bag and keep it under covers. Oh, don't go telling lies to me, Laura.
We're listening to Madison Violet. It's Folk Alley. I'm Jim Bloom. That was Laura Lee off their newest album. They're touring at the moment, and they're taking a moment to visit with us. You have a song that I'd like to bring up, Brenly, that when I first heard it, called The Woodshop, it had a reference to the number 52. And we did a little search on YouTube to discover the story about your brother, who was the 52nd homicide victim in Toronto.
Mm-hmm.
And The Woodshop talks about your father actually making a little urn for his remains. How tough was that? I know it must have been terrible. And then what was it like bringing it to song?
Well, I mean, yeah, it was a unbelievably tragic event. And I can remember, the day just around the funeral, the day before and the day of the funeral, going down into the basement and watching my father, building this urn, and just wondering, like, every time I walked by him, I just went, how is he doing this? And, because we had gone to the funeral home and we were looking at urns. And, my dad and I just kind of looked at each other and said, you should just build one. And my dad said, yeah, and I've got this perfect piece of wood that a friend of his gave him like 20 years ago, and he still had. And to bring it to song, I wrote so many verses and choruses and poems, and, just one after the other. I probably wrote 20 different things, and none of them that I could sing. Every time I tried to sing it, I would break down, or it just wouldn't come through. And then Lisa and I were in Australia, and we started working on this little kind of finger styling part together, and then it just came, and then this song I started singing in, and I had the chorus I'd sort of had already in my mind, and it was cathartic in the process of writing all the songs. But when I finally got to this one, it was like, okay, this is one that I'd like people to hear. As hard as it is for my parents, I mean, my parents skip it on the album every time. It's just they can't hear it, and it's hard to play it when they're in the audience. But I think they're thankful for it as well.
You two have nearly a 10-year career together, and you sing beautifully together. Did that come easy, or did you have to work on it?
It was pretty, it was kismet. It was like as soon as, I had this little thing called a head rush, which is like a looping device. And one of the first times Lisa and I ever rehearsed together, this is before Lisa started singing. It was more or less, she was just singing backup in bands, but about this far off the mic. So you could never hear her really.
Now, Lisa, you were also involved in a musical celebration of the Mamas and Papas, and you toured the States and Canada. How did you get involved with that?
I got a phone call. Funny enough, Brenly and I had a little bit of downtime, and I was like, "Oh no, what are we going to do? What am I going to do?
How are we going to pay for rent?
How am I going to pay rent?" And came back from a really stressful day and listened to my messages on the machine, and it said, "Hello, Lisa. This is Denny Doherty from the Mamas and Papas, and I'm wondering what you're doing for the next 3 months." And that's basically how it happened. And I guess he got my phone number from the director of the play, who also wrote it with him. And Denny is from the east coast of Canada, from Halifax, just outside Halifax. So there were a lot of east coast musicians that he put into the show specifically, which was really nice. And we did it in Toronto, and we did it in Cleveland, and in Washington, a few other places.
Well, how had he heard you?
They called me, I guess.
All those East Coasters know each other.
Yeah, we get around down there. He called me in, and I went and, just sang with him and played the fiddle at the audition, and they had to, so I was there to kind of invoke the spirit of Michelle in the show, even though, Michelle obviously didn't play the fiddle, but I was singing all of her parts, and it was such an incredibly challenging show as well, because the harmonies that John wrote were just unbelievable.
And difficult.
And challenging, yeah. It was great. I mean, by the end of the show, I felt like I had a much stronger voice and a bigger range.
Did you have to dye your hair?
I did bleach my hair blonde for the Toronto. Actually, the first 2 inches of my hair were still brown roots, because that's how Michelle had her hair for a lot. She had, long roots and then bleached hair. So that's how I looked for one summer. And then when we brought it down to Cleveland, I didn't dye my hair. They tried a wig, and then we just left it with just my natural hair. You
do kind of look like her a little bit, don't you?
It's funny because when I had blonder hair, that comment came up a lot. I don't see it because, it's me. I only see me. But that comment did come up a lot in the press.
And Adrian, who do you look like?
You tell me.
Well, I haven't seen you in the post office, but what do you? What's your impression now playing with these two singers and singing the third part?
Right.
Watch out! You got to get in a van with us.
That's right.
Oh no, it's a pleasure. It's great. It's fun. It's being on the road with two friends and playing music and singing songs, and great songs, really fun songs.
I'm sure you've been in other bands where you've maybe had more of a role as a creator and as a leader. Is there something relaxing about playing bass and singing the third part, not having to worry about much of the rest, or am I wrong about that?
I don't consider it any different than anything else. It's just it's what I do, so it's just another day. It's what we do.
We don't put a leash around his creative input. He's likes to give loads of input. When we're rehearsing, he has as much creative say as we do, really. We really are when we're playing as a trio, we really are a trio. No one's different.
The future. You've got almost 10 years behind you. What's ahead more of the same? Do you have a lofty goal or
Money.
Money?
Oh,
Is
God.
it money?
No.
Because that's why we're in this. We're in
Right.
this for
That's
the money.
why all the musicians are in it, because the money is so good.
We make
No, I
thousands
think-
of dollars.
I think we obviously want to
That's
keep
right.
doing. We obviously want to keep doing what we're doing, and see growth, and constantly be growing as musicians, as songwriters, and as well as growing our fan base, our following, so that we can go into a city and everybody's singing along. I think that's a goal. Is when we walk into a room and we start to play and people are singing along, and it's nice to see when it does happen now. But it's that's what I strive towards.
We have Lisa, Brenly, and Adrian, who are Madison Violet. Thank you so much for spending some time with us at Folk Alley. And can I coax one more from you?
Absolutely.
No,
No.
of course you can.
All right. What would you like to do to close?
We're going to play Crying, if that's all right with you.
That's fine.
And Crying is another song about the loss of my brother and the fact that in all the years, in the 46 years that I didn't know him for 46 years, but I never saw him cry once. And I always wondered if I'd seen him cry, maybe he hadn't, with all the struggles he had, he wouldn't have found himself in the place that he did.
No poetry, no fire, no telly or tire, no litter, no gold, no growing old. It's not a bad world, brother. It's not a bad world. Crying your eyes out. It's all about crying your eyes out. Cry on me now. Cry on me now. No shepherd, no shame, no pictures to frame, no fix, no glory, no telling your story. It's not a bad world, brother. It's not a bad world. Crying your eyes out. It's all about crying your eyes out. Cry on me now. Cry on me now. Now that you're gone, I hope you get a chance to sit down with God. I hope you get a chance to question the man in cloth. It's not a bad world, brother. It's not a bad world, brother. It's not a bad world, brother. It's not a bad